Hey, how's everybody doing? Welcome back to the Hot Rod Workshop. Today, we're going to be discussing some bead rolling tips. Bead rolling is great for strengthening panels, especially large flat panels. You see them a lot in floors of old cars, new cars. They also offer a great industrial look if you're doing some interior paneling or any kind of decorative piece inside the car. There's a lot of topics to discuss with bead rolling, but today we're going to focus on two primary tips I like to add to my bead rolling work, and that is pre-stretching and coining. So I laid out two panels with the same design that I'm going to bead roll. One panel I'm going to bead roll straight to the machine with no pre-stretching, and we'll see the outcome that we get. Then we're going to pre-stretch, bead roll, and coin this panel, and we'll be able to contrast between the two. This is the machine we're going to be doing the bead rolling in. This is an old bead rolling machine. It was originally a hand crank. I converted it into a power unit and also built a stand for it. We'll go into further detail about this machine in a later video, but for now, this is the tool we're going to be using to place the beads in our panels. Now I like to start my die about 1 inch to 2 inches away from the edge that I desire. And right about there is touching. So from there I'll turn in 1, 2 turns with the crank, lock in place, throw the machine in reverse, once I reach the edge, flip the machine into forward. And that's that. Now we've achieved the 3 beads in this panel, but you'll notice the panel itself is very distorted. That's because these 3 areas have technically shrunk in size. Now, pre-stretching will alleviate that issue. For the next panel to not have this distortion taking place, we're going to compensate for that area that the bead roller shrinks by stretching these areas first. Now, the English wheel works on the same concept as your rolling pin in your kitchen. Ultimately, it will crush the sheet metal in between these 2 dies, ultimately stretching the material out. Now, the lower die has a slight radius, and that is for clearance purposes. The more and more you run this machine over the same areas, the more and more stretching you will achieve, and it will start to shape in both directions. And as it does that, your lower die must have the clearance in order to compensate for that. Thus why they have multiple dies. Some of them are almost complete full spheres. Now the goal here is to work this metal in between these 2 dies and stretch the material in that area. All right, so this is after running the second panel through the English wheel. Notice something kind of interesting. I have it lined up with the old panel, and if you notice, the distortion that happened in this panel is opposite of the distortion that's happening in this panel, which makes sense because this panel is technically shrunken down because of the beads. This is stretched out. Once we compound this stretch with that shrink, it should level out. Okay, now here is the new panel sized up to the old panel that we never pre-stretched. And you'll notice right away that there is very little to no distortion on the pre-stretched panel. Now we're gonna take it a step further with coining. At this point, I'd like to do a little cleaning, just a simple Scotch-Brite pad. So coining is basically creating a nice edge on your bead to almost make it look like it was stamped from a factory. When you run it in the bead roller and you just end it, it kind of washes into the panel. You'll notice here how it has a sharp edge, and it kind of, the edge disappears and then it just kind of fades into the panel. So ultimately the goal here is to connect these two hard lines of the bead together in a nice radius, flattening out that washed out area. I whipped up a real quick corking tool that with some finesse should be able to achieve that. You want to drill a hole in a piece of round stock like this, the same diameter as the distance of these two lines. This, with a little bit of work with a hammer and kind of moving it around, you'll watch this washed out area start to harden up a little bit into a nice edge. All right, there you have it. Some nice rounded edges. The washed over areas are flattened out to the rest of the panel. I scuffed it up one more time with Scotch-Brite. Looks pretty good. Looks like it was almost stamped out of a machine. Now those wooden corking tools, they work out okay for temporary use. If you're looking for something a little bit more permanent, I found this old punch tool, Lawson Products Incorporated, and it's really neat because it had a replaceable head on it, and I thought, well, you know, I don't want to damage or harm the punching aspect of it for gaskets and rubber circles punched out of sheets or whatever. So I made this little aluminum corking tool for coining, specifically for this tool. Drops in place. And this one is, it's aluminum, so you can't really beat it too much, but for aluminum panels like this, it works out really well. And does the exact same thing, just a little bit more precise. If you were doing this on steel, of course, you would use like a hardened steel. So yeah, that's pre-stretching, bead rolling, and coining. Really pretties up your panel. I just Whew, okay. Sorry about that. Sometimes I can't help myself. Hey, thanks for watching. Jeez. Sit. Paw. Paw. Good girl. Oh, you're full of mud.